Hello and welcome to Buck's ASMR. I'm Buck and today is story time. Today is a twofer brought to you by r/TrueCrimes. Both stories are from Wonderful Variation. However, before we begin, I want to warn everyone that these stories are severe trigger warnings. If you feel you cannot listen to them, please switch to another video. The first story is about the torture and murder of Jennifer Daugherty. So sit back, relax, and let's go on an adventure. Jennifer Daugherty, 30 years old, Pennsylvania woman goes missing after a sleepover. She is later found stuffed in a trash can near a middle school parking lot. 6 people are arrested and charged with kidnapping her and torturing her to death. Jennifer Daugherty, a 30-year-old woman, was found deceased on February 11, 2010. Her body was found near the parking lot of Greensburg-Salem Middle School, stuffed into a garbage can. On February 10, 2010, Jennifer left her parents' house. She told her parents that she was going to a sleepover in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. Jennifer had a doctor's appointment in Greensburg scheduled for the next day, so she planned to sleep over at a friend's apartment, then make her appointment and return home the next day. Her stepfather, Bobby Murphy, dropped her off at a bus station. Jennifer gave him a kiss, and then she traveled to Greensburg by herself. No responsible person could have expected that anything bad was going to happen. She left behind a note for her mother. I hope that you will have a good day at work, and I also love you very much. I will talk to you sometime later. According to her family, Jennifer was mentally equivalent to being 14 years old despite being 30. She lived in Mount Pleasant, but she frequently traveled to Greensburg by herself for dentist and counseling appointments. Her parents were pressuring her to move out and be more independent, despite her disability, something they later said they regretted. Still, Jennifer was excited that she'd soon be moving into her own apartment. She wrote in her MySpace profile, "This is my time to make a new start for myself, making new friends and not being afraid of anything." That would be Jennifer's final message. In Greensburg, she made friends with a 17-year-old girl, Angela Marinucci. Angela and Jennifer would talk for hours over the phone as though they were both teenagers, despite Jennifer technically being much older. Like Jennifer, Angela suffered from a disability. When Angela was 15, she'd suffered a traumatic head injury, dramatically changing the trajectory of Angela's young life. The two women, Jennifer and Angela, appeared to be the best of friends. So when Angela invited Jennifer over for a sleepover, Jennifer eagerly accepted. However, when Jennifer arrived at the sleepover on February 10th, the evening quickly took a dark turn. There were 6 people in the apartment: Angela Marinucci, Peggy Miller, Amber Medinger, Ricky Smyrns, Melvin Knight, and Robert Masters. This group would eventually become known as the Greensburg Six. Jennifer had met most of them before and considered them to be her friends. She was technically the oldest person there. Soon after Jennifer arrived, the others began to bully her. The bullying escalated from simple heckling to aggravated assault to outright torture. The motive for this coordinated attack on Jennifer has always been unclear, but the most popular explanation seems to be that Jennifer had made some joke about having sex with Ricky Smyrns, Angela's boyfriend, and that Angela had a vengeful overreaction. That doesn't really make any sense to me, because why would the others go along with that? I definitely think Angela was involved, but I don't think it was her idea to kill Jennifer. Another proposed explanation is that the torture was a hate crime committed against Jennifer because of her mental disability. I tend to find that explanation far more convincing than the supposed love triangle between Smyrns, Jennifer, and Angela. During a series of torture sessions that lasted for around 30 hours, Jennifer was forcibly stripped, violated, and severely beaten with a variety of household objects. Her head was shaved, and her face was covered in nail polish. Spices were poured into her eyes to cause burning. Throughout this ordeal, she constantly asked why they were doing this to her and begged them to stop. She was also tied up with Christmas lights and forced to pose as a demented Christmas tree. Neighbors later testified that they heard screaming coming from the apartment. The plan was we were trying to embarrass her, humiliate her, make her feel belittled, Amber Medinger later testified. torture was occasionally interrupted by family meetings, where the others would decide what to do with her next. During these meetings, Jennifer was left tied up and gagged in a closet. At some point, Jennifer tried to fight back. She kicked Amber hard in the stomach. Amber then claimed that she was pregnant. Melvin then told Jennifer that anybody who kicks a pregnant lady in the stomach deserves to die. As punishment for kicking Amber, Jennifer was forced to consume urine, feces, and detergent. Jennifer's sister, Joy Burkholder, attempted to call her at some point during this time, only to find that Jennifer's voicemail had mysteriously been changed to, "You've reached the phone of Melvin and Amber." At the final family meeting, the group unanimously voted to kill Jennifer, reasoning that if she weren't killed, then she'd tell others about the torture. Knight and Ricky Smyrns marched her to the bathroom, and Knight stabbed her over 20 times. But when they checked on her later, they found her still alive, still clinging to life after all the abuse she'd endured. Melvin and Ricky responded by slicing her wrist and then strangling her to make certain she was truly dead. Melvin and Ricky then placed Jennifer inside a trash bag, which in turn was placed inside a trash can. The trash can was then taken out to Greensburg-Salem Middle School, where it was hidden underneath the truck. The owner of the truck found the body and called 911 early the next morning. Jennifer's mother, Denise Murphy, was brought in to identify the body. "I was in total shock and still in total denial. I just couldn't imagine how that could happen to her," Murphy later said. Angela Marinucci and the others were quickly arrested. Prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty against Amber Meitinger, Ricky Smyrns, and Melvin Knight. However, Amber was eventually allowed to plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testifying against the others. It should also be noted that Amber was pregnant from Melvin at the time of her arrest. She gave birth in jail, and the infant was apparently given to a foster family. Meitinger spoke slowly and deliberately throughout her testimony, frequently pausing to wipe tears from her eyes. Unlike the others, neither Peggy Miller nor Robert Masters was ever accused of participating in the actual torture or killing of Jennifer Daugherty. Neither of them ever actually touched or hurt Jennifer. However, under Pennsylvania law, they could still be charged with murder. Peggy later expressed regret for her role in the murder. "I am sorry, and I am guilty," Miller said. "She was my friend, and I should not have voted for her to die." At one point during the night of torture, Jennifer was left alone in the apartment with Peggy and Robert while the others went out to get food. She begged them to help her, and they refused. Ultimately, Ricky Smyrns and Melvin Knight were sentenced to death. However, the state of Pennsylvania has not executed any person since 1999. Peggy Miller, Amber Meitinger, and Robert Masters were all given lengthy prison sentences. They will eventually be eligible for parole, but they'll have to wait a very long time for that. Robert will be eligible for parole after serving 30 years, Peggy after 35 years, and Amber after 40. However, Amber Meitinger recently applied for a pardon, so we'll see how that goes. Our next video is about the disappearance of Rachel Timmerman. Rachel Timmerman, 19 years old, disappears after accusing a man of violating her. She's later found chained to the bottom of a lake in Huron-Manistee National Forest. Her friend, Wayne Davis, also disappears and is later found chained to the bottom of a lake. Rachel Timmerman, a 19-year-old woman, disappeared on June 3rd, 1997. At the time, she was living in Newaygo County, Michigan. A little over a month later, she was found chained to the bottom of a lake. Her autopsy revealed that she'd still been alive at the time she entered the lake, and that she died from drowning. Rachel had been scheduled to testify at the trial of Marvin Gabrian. Marvin was the uncle of one of Rachel's friends, Mike Gabrian. Rachel had accused Marvin of violating her, and Marvin was charged with third-degree sexual assault. His preliminary hearing was set for June 5th, 1997, and Rachel was scheduled to testify at that hearing. But she never showed up. Rachel was last seen alive on June 3rd when she left her house to go out on a date with a man named John Weeks. Rachel did not know Weeks, but one day he'd started calling her and asking her to go out on a date with him. Rachel initially refused because she did not know him. However, he kept calling her, and eventually, Rachel reluctantly agreed to go out with him. Rachel was never seen alive again. What Rachel didn't know was that Marvin had hired Weeks to lure Rachel out of her house. However, karma would catch up with John Weeks very quickly, as he also disappeared shortly after that. He was last seen on June 22nd, 1997. His body has never been found, but it is generally believed that Marvin killed him to tie up loose ends. Wayne Davis, who also had been scheduled to testify at that hearing, also failed to show up at the hearing. He'd last been seen on February 12, 1997. His girlfriend, Darlene Lazo, went to his house to investigate and found a note from Davis. In the note, Davis said he decided to move to California. However, Lazo looked through the house and found that all of Wayne's clothes were still there. Nothing had been packed up. In particular, his army field jacket was still in the house, and Lazo knew he never left home without it. It should be noted that Marvin Gabriel had been released from jail on bond February 5th, about a week prior to Wayne's disappearance. Before Rachel disappeared, she told many people that she was terrified of Marvin Gabriel. She'd initially been very reluctant to accuse him of anything because she was afraid of him. After the event, Marvin had threatened her that if she ever told the police about what happened, he'd track her down and kill her. He also threatened to kill Rachel's daughter, Shannon. However, Rachel's family convinced her to press charges. So when Rachel could not be found, her family worried that Marvin might have killed her. However, their fears were assuaged when they received a letter from Rachel a few days after she vanished. In the letter, Rachel said that she was eloping with a man she'd met recently. She did not reveal the man's name, but said she'd be gone for at least a few weeks because they were getting married in Arkansas. She also confessed that she'd never been violated. She made up the whole thing for attention. The prosecutor, Crystal Roach, who'd been handling Rachel's case, also received a letter from Rachel telling her to drop the charges. The judge overseeing the case also received a letter from Rachel, wherein she admitted she'd fabricated the entire story and told him to dismiss the charges against Marvin. The letters were stamped with distinctive holographic stamps depicting a space station. Bizarrely, everybody, including Rachel's own family, seemed to have accepted these letters as genuine. Her family did not even report her missing because apparently they genuinely believed she'd eloped to Arkansas. Nobody was looking for her. Rachel's family later received a second letter from Rachel wherein she said that she decided to stay in Arkansas permanently. However, she still would not reveal the name of the man she had married. On July 5th, 1997, two fishermen were fishing in Oxford Lake in Oakland County, Michigan. To their shock and horror, they found the body of a woman chained to cinder blocks at the bottom of the lake. This was Rachel Timmerman. Marvin Gabriel was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. There is some evidence that Rachel and Shannon were kept alive as hostages for at least a few days before they were killed. When police raided Marvin's home, they found diapers and baby bottles and other items which suggest that Rachel and Shannon were kept alive, at least for a time. The most disturbing thing they found was a book about the Colleen Stan abduction, which made them think that Marvin might have initially planned on keeping Rachel as a slave. When they asked him about the book, he said that he was running a Christian bookstore out of his home. However, that was the only book found in the entire house, so it was a pretty sparse bookstore. They also found stamps identical to the ones used on the letters, holographic stamps depicting a space station. It seems like Marvin kept her alive so she could be coerced into writing those letters, then killed her. They also found cinder blocks identical to the ones used to weigh down Timmerman's body and a plethora of other evidence. Shannon has never been found, but is presumed deceased. Marvin's trial began in 2002. His behavior was erratic and frequently violent. He tried to fire his attorney, saying that his attorney was a Democrat and he wanted to be represented by a Republican. The judge denied his request, saying that while defendants have a right to an attorney, they don't have a right to demand an attorney from a particular political party. Marvin then said he wanted to represent himself, and the judge denied that too. At least once during the trial, Marvin physically attacked his attorney in full view of the jury, although prosecutors would later argue that it had been a deliberate stunt to try and induce a mistrial. Marvin was convicted and sentenced to death. He remains on federal death row to this day. However, it is unlikely he will ever actually be executed because Michigan outlawed the death penalty in 1847. The body of Wayne Davis was discovered by canoeists in 2002, just a few days after Marvin had been sentenced to death for the murder of Rachel Timmerman. Like Rachel, Wayne's body was found in a lake, weighed down with cinder blocks. I just wanted to thank Wonderful Variation for writing about these stories. Now about Jennifer Daugherty. I had to read it several times because I was certain I had not understood what happened properly. I was left speechless at what I had read and could not believe that 6 people had collectively decided these actions over the course of days were good and honest things to do. It was a truly despicable and disgusting act on their parts, and they have earned more than the time that they were given. With Rachel Timmerman, the story is an absolute roller coaster from beginning to end, but the pressing question that I have is why everyone just believed that a letter where a victim who had already claimed she feared for her life claims that she made up the whole story, and everyone just took it as gospel. It blows my mind. Be sure to check out the link below and leave an upvote for both of these stories. And thank you for coming and relaxing with me. Feel free to subscribe for more content, and good night.